Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. So you heard a lot this morning about some really powerful forces, tsunamis and typhoons, hopefully in business, not in weather. So welcome back. This first panel this morning is about digital business models, and I think, and when I was thinking about what we should be talking about, that is really one of the arenas where there's significant change and transition from the past at an accelerated pace. So our panelists are going to really address some of those questions. And Michael Sung, who will be the moderator of this session, is the director for the Center for Industry Engagement and Internship, School of Engineering at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, who's joined us. Actually, we've rearranged the furniture now. We have almost a living room. And he will be joined by Dave Moskovitz, who is an American colleague of mine who has settled in New Zealand, Henek Lo, General Manager of Greater China Region Airbnb, and I'm looking forward to his comments based on some of the things said this morning, and Simon Loong, who's founder and CEO of WeLab. So I'll leave it to you, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we have a very exciting panel today. I think we want to start out with Henek Lo. When we're talking about the shared economy, some of the speakers have mentioned, I think Airbnb represents an innovator and probably the granddaddy of them all in terms of this sort of shared economy. So Henek is currently the general manager for Greater China for Airbnb, and he was part of the first landing team that started Airbnb's operations in Asia through setting up the Singapore hub. So in his role as the head of sales for Northeast Asia and now the GM for Greater China, he has been instrumental in Airbnb's presence in the region and oversaw the hypergrowth of the company in Asia. Okay, Henek joined Airbnb in 2012 and previously from JP Morgan and Macquarie, where he was his role was in VP of electronic sales trading, servicing large institutional hedge funds that traded in the APAC region. So please give me a warm round of applause for Henek.
Is this on? Hi. Hi, everyone. So my name is Henek. Thanks for the warm welcome introduction. I'm super excited to be here for a couple of reasons. One is Hong Kong is home for me. Number two is a full room of people with similar thoughts, thought leaders, and also a lot of things about sharing economy is right down our alley. And lastly, with Herman's blessing, I'm not sure if he's still here, a long time ago, I actually drew the logo for Cyberport when I was 16 years old. So that's something, Cyberport holds a really dear place to me in my heart. Great. So the presentation is on. So today we're talking about the next wave of IT. What are things to come? And obviously Airbnb being what we do I will hope is a prime example of that. In order for me to get into that a little bit more, I wanted to talk about the founding story because I think this is really powerful in an entrepreneurial way, how the founders actually started the company. Some of the slides here I'm presenting today is actually, I haven't really presented too much in Hong Kong, so you guys can see some of the earlier stages of Airbnb, which is really interesting. So Airbnb started because it was going to be solving a problem for our founders. Founders Brian, Joe, and Nate were in San Francisco. They were basically trying to solve a very human problem. Most of us here have to do this every day. I, for myself, definitely need to, which is actually just paying rent. They were short on $1,100 of rent. They needed to come up with it within, I think, a month or two. And the founders got a little antsy, a little nervous. But they looked around at this particular picture here. So this is the original apartment where Airbnb started and where the founders originally lived. So they looked around their apartment and realized that the most underutilized asset that they had was actually their own space in their own apartment. And at the time, there was a design conference that was coming to San Francisco, and all the hotels, most of the professional accommodation services were all booked out. So they were like, okay, here's an idea. They're going to blow up 3 air mattresses. And for people who have never slept on an air mattress before, is actually you blow air into a plastic, bubble up thing, and you actually sleep on it. And they're going to serve breakfast. So they blow 3 of them up, put up a website, and voila, you have air bed and breakfast. So that's actually the start of the company, and that we're in short known for Airbnb today. This was the start. this is the first version of the website that was on 2007. As you can see, it was for the design conference in San Francisco. And actually, fun fact, 2 of our founders are RISD design graduates, so they're designers by trade. And we have Nate Blicharski, who's actually the CTO. He's the mind and the engineer behind all the websites. Our founders, Brian, Joe, and Nate. So fast forward 6 years from now, what has Airbnb become? So Airbnb now is in 190 countries as well as 34,000 cities. And what we do is we're essentially a platform which makes it very easy for you to rent out other people's home or renting out your own home. So you have an iPhone, you have an Android, you have a computer, you can snap a few pictures, write a description, put it online, and you're opened up to a global community of travelers, and people will book your place. So some beautiful pictures. Whether it's a place, apartment for a night, castle for a week, a villa for a month. When I looked at this slide, I was wondering who will actually stay in a villa for a month. I would like to do that. And we were basically a platform that connects people from all over the world. And last thing, Airbnb also empowers hosts from all over the world. So this is one of our hosts in Tokyo, and next to her is Nate. This picture was actually recently snapped, I think just 2 months ago. And Nate was talking to the host community. We still do this today. We actually meet a lot of our community. We host community events where we actually talk to them, understand what they liked, what they didn't like about the platform. And I believe her name is Haruko-san. She's 75 years old. And she's renting out her spare bedroom in Tokyo right now to travelers going to Tokyo. And she's actually hosted more than 50 guests. And when we asked her why she does this, she's like, I'm too old to travel. I don't really know the language that well, speaking English. So she's like, I want the traveling to come to me. So actually a lot of guests from all over the world go and visit her, and she learns about the world that way. So we've done a lot of good things. There are a lot of news about the growth of the company, but really when I try to visualize it, I think this is a really powerful couple of slides. So this is the first time when Airbnb existed back in 2009. So every little circle up on there actually represents how many listings are in a particular area. So as you can see, when we first started, we're mainly in New York, California. Fast forward 1 year, this is 2010. So this was the year when the company, well, they were already in YC, Y Combinator, and Paul Graham says that, hey, to our founders and advice that's something that sits with the company to this day. It's like, where are your users? Where are your community? And people were asking, they're all, well, founders are saying they're all in New York. So the founders are like, okay, fly to New York, go talk to them. So they talked to all, I think there was only like 100 people on the site at a time, talked to 100 people and asked them what they liked and did not like about Airbnb. And they improved and implemented everything. So one example was like, one of the hosts was like, wouldn't it be cool if you clicked a button and somebody will come and snap pictures of your listing to put it online? And over the weekend, Nate went home, put a button on the website, came out and said, hey, it's done. And they actually clicked the button, and the people who showed up were the founders with a camera. And they actually snapped pictures of the home and put up the site and the listings. So this is where the word of mouth started for Airbnb, and also the international expansion. So this is 2011. You can start to see people using the product from, let's say, Paris, went to New York. They then went home to Paris and thought that, hey, I can also be a host. And then so the hosting began. Push a little harder international. This is 2012. And lastly, my favorite, 2013, the latest capture of our graphical representation. We've pretty much covered all of Europe. I don't think you can even see the lines of Europe anymore. And lastly, in Asia, which we manage over here, also seen in a very healthy and solid growth in this side of the world. So all that put together, So all that put together, we're currently at 1 million listings in 34,000 cities, in 190 countries. You can find an Airbnb in all these places. Our global community is sharing like it's never before. And the key point I really want to make here is Airbnb is not really a new idea. Actually, if you go a generation back, 2 generations back, this is how people traveled. There were not too many professional accommodation services from a couple of generations ago, so people actually stayed in each other's home. But when you put an old idea and new technology, infuse the two, you connected all of a sudden to millions and billions of people around the world, and you have a community, a marketplace, a platform called Airbnb. And we've made it trusted enough and transparent enough that people can use it and actually trust it, right? That's the most important thing, to be able to trust the platform. So we have review systems, we have verifications, everything to make you feel like even before the guest or the host that you meet, you already feel like you kind of know the person. You're connected on Facebook, LinkedIn, you know who common friends that you have, you can converse with them, you can message each other, and that is a really powerful platform. I love talking about this slide just because of how easy it is for me to say. We're currently serviced more than 30 million guests around the world. And as you can see, at the very beginning days when it was first launched, nobody used it. Later, 2011, and as soon as we completed the Asia Pie a little bit, then this is where the rocket started going off. People started telling people that I've used Airbnb, and this is in 2014, we started with 10 million, so we've serviced another 20 million guests in just the last year alone. So Hal pulled me aside just now. It's like, all the presentations this morning, all the talks this morning was a high bar. So this is something that I want to talk about, with Roger's comment on sharing economy, and also on KK's regarding let the product sell itself. Some of the things I want to talk about is obviously sharing economy. There are a lot of fancy textbook definitions out there about sharing economy, but something a little bit more casual. What it essentially is a socioeconomic system where individuals can share underutilized assets in the positions with others willing to pay for it. So again, another fun fact, sharing economy is not really sharing, because sharing you don't charge. But here, you actually, with a small incremental, you pay for money and then people will be able to share their assets with you. But previously, when there was no platforms like Airbnb, you couldn't share underutilized assets that way. Now you have access. You have access to many different things, and you have access to cars, you have access to apartments, and some of the companies and logos out here are just a few of the examples of the sharing economy companies out there. And some of them, like for example, I found very interesting, it's just sharing skills, right? TaskRabbit is a popular platform in the States where you can ask somebody to come to your house and do some handiwork for you. Oh, you need a pipe fix, you need a light fix, your monitor isn't working. Somebody will come for a small fee and do that. Previously, you probably had to do it all on yourself. Again, the power of the internet. Also, one thing about the sharing economy is that our hosts and a guest and actually have a significant impact to the community that they host in. So some fun facts and some stats, and staying conscious of time. Guests stay longer and actually spend more on Airbnb because of Airbnb. A typical guest stays about 3 nights. An Airbnb guest stays about 5 nights, and they also stay a little bit longer. Supplementary income for the host. Supplemental income, sorry, for the host. About 50% of our hosts actually cite that they need Airbnb to make ends meet. This is paying rent, paying mortgage, or some of this money goes back into their daily spending, and that actually strengthens the economy itself, because for every dollar you spend on Airbnb, that host is bringing it back into the local economy, into the local neighborhoods that they live in. Whereas if you paid a company, a lot of that goes into marketing, so on and so forth. You can do the math. Lastly is distributed tourism. So with, Hong Kong is a prime example of that, right? So with a very, very popular destination as a city, most of the professional accommodations are usually in one place. You have the Central, you have the Tsim Sha Tsui, you have the, Mong Koks, and the popular neighborhoods will have all the hotels. But with a decentralized approach like Airbnb, you basically can spread a lot of that income everywhere. Because you can have that in, some of our more popular places are like Sai Wan Hall, right? Stuff like that. You probably will not want to go there because of a hotel, but now with Airbnb, you have access. And also with the money, it funnels back into those neighborhoods. Lastly is surge capacity. So we had an event recently, a small event in Brazil called the World Cup. And actually one of the big things that happened there was 1 out of 6 visitors, international visitors that won a World Cup actually stayed in an Airbnb. This is really a big milestone for the company because it comes to shown that with big events, you can actually have more people come into your particular city for an event. So another great announcement we have is for 2016, the Olympics, we're also the official alternative accommodation partner of the Olympics. So this is how we're going to help a company scale, a city scale up their accommodation resources so that people can visit and have, enjoy the Olympics. Lastly, just to call out, all the sharing economy models, all the advantages are there, and I showed it to you. But however, there's also regulatory headwinds for us, right? So there's 2 sides of the spectrum. One spectrum is you have no regulation for someone visiting your home, right? If you're friends with somebody or your relatives come to, let's just say, Barcelona or come to Hong Kong, there's no regulations around that. You can stay there because you know them and they let you do it. The other side of the spectrum is then hotels, where it's 365 days, cookie-cutter rooms, all made available for rental or short-term accommodation. But now you have Airbnb. A typical host on Airbnb rents out the place anywhere between 30 and 60 days. They don't by no means do this as a business long term, right? So they want to do supplementary income. They have a spare room, a spare apartment. But typically speaking, the laws and regulations right now may need to play catch up to that. And to Roger's point, is just how fast these things are catching up. So laws and regulations take time. And with the internet, we basically expedited the whole thing by a couple of times faster than it normally does. So there's a lot of catch up to do. But there are good news. This is the latest news, hot off the press. I'm not sure if anybody saw that. But London actually, through a lot of talks, a lot of meetings with London and the government there, they actually made it possible for people to do Airbnb as long as you rent it out no more than 90 days a year. And this is a big win for us. Kudos to our London team. And this is a big news I wanted to share as well. And hopefully is one of the first of many good news I'll share. But that's the last slide I have for food for thought. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so thank you very much, Henek. Our second special guest panelist hails from New Zealand. So David Moskovitz is a successful serial entrepreneur, professional director, and startup investor now. He's been called the godfather of Wellington startups and was involved in the establishment of Angel HQ, a local angel investment network, as well as Lightning Lab, New Zealand's startup accelerator. And in addition to that, Startup NZ, which is the National Startup Support Organization. He's a director of a number of startups in large organizations such as Open Polytechnic and Internet NZ. So he's also a successful serial entrepreneur and has been involved with numerous lexicography projects, nonprofits, social enterprises, and interfaith initiatives. So let's give a warm hand for David.
Thanks. Right, so thanks very much. I'm here today to basically ask the question, is the internet the great leveler, or is it the great evil aggregator of power? And hopefully along the way, we'll be able to explore some themes excuse me, about how we can better use technology in the future. So just, I'll start off with a little bit about myself. I'm from Wellington, and this is a picture taken from just outside my garage. So everything they say about New Zealand is true. The sky is blue. It's a lovely place. A little bit about myself. I have a consulting company. I do lexicography consulting, IT lexicography, building dictionaries. But that's something that I started out doing. But I also do governance consulting and stuff around investment. I'm on the board of Internet New Zealand, which runs the .nz domain space. I'm also on the board of Open Polytechnic, which is New Zealand's open distance learning provider, funded by the government. About 1 in 5 tertiary students in New Zealand are on our books. I was also one of the founding investors and mentors at Lightning Lab, which is New Zealand's only business accelerator. We're running in 3 cities over the next 12 months. Also, was one of the people behind Startup Weekend from the very early days in New Zealand. We've now run 30 events in 9 cities, and this is in a country of 3 million people. So I think we have the highest activity in really early stage startups in the Startup Weekend world. And that prompted us to start Startup New Zealand, where we're coordinating people and startups all over the country. I'm also chairman of the board of a company called the Appreciation Engine, which is a social media monitoring platform, and Publons, which I'll talk about in a moment, as well as a number of other startups. So I spend basically all my time helping startups get off the ground. I call myself a startup community builder, and my goal is for New Zealand to really take up entrepreneurialism in a way that it hasn't in the past and transform our economy from being primary produce into being completely wired. So as I said, I'm from Wellington, and Wellington's a really interesting place. We have 200,000 people in an area the size of Hong Kong. So, and the great thing about it is that you can walk from one end of downtown to the other in about 20 minutes. But you need to schedule 30 minutes to do that, because along the way you'll run into 4 or 5 people that you haven't seen in a while that you really need to catch up with. It's like a small town where everybody knows each other, and it's really, really easy to do business there. Now, last year I did a talk at the first TEDx Wellington on the 4 superpowers of the internet, which explored what are the basic underlying attributes of the internet which has led to this explosive growth in entrepreneurialism, as well as an explosive growth in the economy. And these 4 core values, 4 superpowers of the internet, as defined by the Internet Governance Forum in 2009, are end-to-end, that is, any endpoint or any person on the net should be able to talk to any other endpoint or person on the net. It's built on open standards so that any function of hardware or software in the architecture can be swapped out, improved on, and replaced because all the interfaces are well-defined. Access should be universal. Anybody should be able to access any of the information on the net or any of the people from anywhere. And freedom of expression. The internet regards censorship as a bug and attempts to route around it. So I also argued that entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs are the modern heroes. They're the heroes for our time. We are the people who are out there pushing the boundaries and unlocking value all over the world to actually bring everyone closer together and do great stuff in the future. And underpinning that all is the Charter for Compassion, or the Golden Rule, that we should treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves. There's a reason that the internet is so powerful. There's a reason that it's built on open source. There's a reason that it's all there to facilitate people communicating with each other, and that's because the original architects of the internet had the forethought to want to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves. They want bidirectional flow of information, communication. They were building the world that they want to live in, and that's what we should be doing too. So what are some of the cool things to come out of New Zealand? And Henek, I may never forgive you because you left New Zealand off your map. I should tell you that this is not the first time this has happened, and there's a website that's devoted to world maps that have left New Zealand off. But you can see why, because there's a lot of ocean between us and everybody else. And so we are isolated in many ways, and so that causes great innovation, but it also has some other side effects as well. But anyway, some of the cool stuff coming out of New Zealand. I'm chairman of the board of this company, Publons, and what we're doing is speeding up science through the power of academic peer review. Peer review is if you're an academic and you publish an article, then you need that article to be reviewed by other people before it's accepted to a journal. Someone has to do that reviewing work, but right now nobody gets credit for it, and it takes an awfully long time. Science could go much faster if people got credit for academic peer review. And so that's exactly what we're doing. We're providing that as a platform with open data and open information where science discoveries can be validated and transmitted to other people much quicker than in the past. I'm happy to say we just had our 100,000th review put up on the site in the last couple of days, and we have over 36,000 reviewers, and we're growing at 30% per month. It's really exciting times, and we plan on transforming the scientific landscape. Another really interesting play to come out of New Zealand is LearnCo English. Think of it as Uber for English language teachers. So there are over 200 million English language learners in China alone, but there are nowhere near enough native English speakers in China to help service that market with people who speak English. So our goal is to ensure that China is speaking English with a New Zealand accent by the year 2020. I don't know whether or not we'll achieve that, but this is a really interesting service, and we're exploiting our time zone advantage over the rest of the world through LearnCo. Another really interesting one is a company called Swirl, whose CEO was the head of Mega, which is Kim.com's successor to Mega Upload. But anyway, what they're doing is they're taking Bitcoin's blockchain and using that to validate transactional relationships that don't necessarily have anything to do with finance. So they're taking the underlying architecture that underpins Bitcoin and applying that across a very wide variety of things. This is really revolutionary, and I would expect to see lots of stuff come out of this in the near future. Their primary focus, though, is the Internet of Things in their first outing. And I would argue that the Internet of Things is actually an Internet of people. Because behind each thing that is being connected to the net is a person who has authorized that thing to communicate. That thing is doing something for a person. And after all the relationships that we have ultimately are person to person, even if we have these machine agents working on them for us. So how do we maximize the benefit of all that? What are the things that are going to be making successful startups in the future? Where are the main technological advantages to be had? Well, I would argue that in the future, any successful technology or startup really needs to fulfill the 6 human needs in one sense or another. And I won't read them out for you or describe them, but it's really interesting that as humans, we need both certainty and uncertainty. And that's really fascinating to me because I think it tells a lot about your character as to what that balance is for you. And I think entrepreneurs, they love uncertainty. They eat it for breakfast, whereas people who work in day jobs generally prefer more certainty. Another really important factor in success is Occam's razor. The best solution is the simplest solution. They say that a professional is someone who makes a hard job look easy. The best systems are ones with really easy user interfaces that are actually where there's actually quite a lot of complexity lying beneath the surface. Well, I've taken Occam's razor and I've actually simplified it further, and I call it Moskovitz's sledgehammer, and that is simplicity beats everything. So simplicity is a really important factor. Some other random stuff. The world is global. I think our startups in New Zealand, and I understand Hong Kong as well, are very focused on the local market. We really need to be global from day one. And this is increasingly important as the world becomes a smaller and smaller place. We should hack as much as we can and exploit the unintended consequences of the things that we're doing. I mean, look at Christopher Columbus. He was after India. And, second prize was he got America. And so there are, lots of examples of these endeavors that we launch where the real value is out of things that are completely unexpected. And that's one of the really interesting things in the startup space where I'm interested in investing. It's the execution that really matters. Ideas are cheap, but it's really hard to execute stuff. So I put a lot of emphasis on the teams that we're putting together around these things, and that we're all building the world that we want to live in. So we all want to participate in disruptive innovation, for sure. But disruptive innovation actually has a hard edge. And, Roger mentioned it earlier, you either disrupt or be disrupted. But I think sometimes it's both. And you guys would know about that here because you have been disrupted. And so there are lots of examples of this disruptive technology coming about where they're raising the quality for the majority of people, but there are some people who are left behind. And a good example of that is with Uber. Uber drivers have no requirement to cater to disabled people in the same way that taxi drivers do. So in the Uber revolution, transport is cheaper and more comfortable and more available. But if you're disabled, it's of no use to you because you may not have those facilities. So we need to be careful about these unintended consequences as well. Now, I just heard a podcast over the weekend given by a guy called Paul Sappho from the Loong Now Foundation, where he really summarizes the 4 rules for digital revolutionaries. And rule number 1 is that there are winners and losers. Everything we do, there's some people that gain and some people that lose. Hopefully more people are gaining than losing. But, unfortunately, the world does not operate in this one big kumbaya moment where we're all hugging each other. There are definitely winners and losers. Rule number 2, don't confuse early results with long-term outcomes. 2 data points determine a trend, but often these unforeseen consequences actually take over, and they can go either way. Successful insurgents become overpowerful incumbents. And there are a number of examples of that, which I'm sure we can all think of. And the technologies of freedom become technologies of control. So that last one in particular, technologies of freedom become technologies of control. Is that good or bad? Well, that really all depends on you. Actually, it doesn't depend on you. It depends on all of us collectively to act, to make sure that the technologies that we're designing and developing and the startups that we're launching are actually contributing to building the world that we want to live in. So returning to the initial question, is the internet the great leveler or an evil aggregator of power? It's both. It's just unevenly distributed. And it's up to us to use those technologies to build the world that we want to live in. Thanks.
So thank you very much, David, for your pearls of wisdom. I think that gives a lot of insight on sort of both the power of the internet in terms of freeing everybody to data, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that who controls the data controls all the keys to the kingdom as well. Okay, so we have I want to introduce our third guest. His name is Simon Loong, and he's the founder and CEO of Asia's leading internet finance company called WeLab, and the operator of WeLend in Hong Kong and WeLab in China. Simon has a wealth of financing service experience after working in the banking industry for over 17 years. And an entrepreneur at heart, he founded WeLab in 2013. The company has since then sourced more than 1.2 billion in loan applications and 16,000 members through WeLend. I also heard recently through Simon that he's on track to make 30x growth this year. So very, very sexy numbers coming out of this company. Prior to founding WeLab, Simon was North Asian regional head of unsecured lending at Standard Chartered, and he's also had senior roles at Citibank. So give a warm round of applause for Simon.
Good morning, everyone. So I guess you must all think, like, what is this boring banker doing here, right? You guys had a very interesting presentation from Henek on Airbnb and Dave. It was really, really good. So shall we give them another round of applause? It's very interesting. So for us, like, what are we passionate in? What problem are we trying to solve, right? We are passionate in one thing, disrupting traditional banking or internet finance technologies. We're passionate about fintech. So I know a lot of people in Hong Kong are a little bit confused or slowly getting introduced to this idea of fintech, right? What is fintech? Is it finance? Is it technology? Like, what are you guys trying to do, right? Fintech is using technology to provide financial services. Okay, let's just define this as using technology to provide financial services. So, I mean, previously I've given another talk to eliminate a confusion. Fintech is not like technology. It's not just technology, because technology by itself doesn't provide services. You need to put the technology into a use case, and in our case is financial services. So we had a very humble beginning. We founded in Hong Kong with me and another co-founder in a tiny little office in Shangwan a little bit more than 2 years ago. I think earlier this week, we just crossed our first 100th employee. We have 2 offices now, just about to get into our 3rd office in China. We have office in Hong Kong and another office in Shenzhen. I'm going to quickly introduce this, right? I mean, these are... So what is fintech, right? What we're seeing is fintech basically has three consistent themes, right? Number one is big data driven. Big data is a lot of data that actually allow us to perform very fast, very efficient, and accurate transactions. The second thing is it involves a lot of innovative business models. And we'll talk a little bit about those later on, right? And the third thing is a frictionless online experience. So it is no longer talking about face-to-face, giving you a wet signature and stuff like that, right? With that, it actually transformed into many different business models, just to quote a few, P2P lending. It very much like shared economy in Airbnb case where they share empty flats, we share money, right? Simply share liquidity, as simple as that. Platform lending, crowdfunding, big data, third-party payment, huge in China. Financial aggregator sites, go on and on. You have digital currency. So these are actually just some of the examples of how we're using technology to disrupt traditional banking, to provide more efficient, frictionless financial services. And with that, there's a lot of recurring theme as well, right? Lower cost of capital, using a wide variety of time series, internet social data, crowdfunding, leveraging the power of the crowd, online access. So you don't, it's no longer limited to the opening hours of a bank or how close you are to a bank or your ability to travel to a bank. A lot of database, we love data. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on, right? So in WeLab, what do we exactly do, right? So this is our belief. Right? We believe in credit accessibility and financial freedom. We believe that everyone should have a means to improve their livelihood and to transform their aspiration into a dream. And we do that by providing simple, cheap access to financial services through your mobile phone, through your PC. That is our belief. We believe that with technology, we can provide better financial services. We run three businesses right now. WeLand.hk. Our very first platform in Hong Kong is our test bed where we have decided to combine what we call combining the best of the old and new. The old is our banking experience, risk management, with liquidity flow, treasury, and then with the new internet technology, big data, and a lot of things that we're learning from different industries. Financial industry is an industry that has been, well, I would say one of the last few to be disrupted. If you look at how many industries have been disrupted through the last 15 years. And this is really starting probably since 2008, after the global financial crisis, when we see that it is actually possible to change the financial industry by startup companies offering really good customer experience and very good data. Okay, and then we operate a second platform which we started in September last year, called WeLab in China. Is one of the leading P2P lending platform in China now. Currently focused on a student segment. We are launching to non-student segment in a couple of weeks. And the core of this is actually we defend. Which we don't talk about a lot, is a proprietary technology. The technology is basically how do we combine a wide array of unstructured data collected through untraditional formats, means, devices, and to get a better understanding. And we'll talk a little bit about that later as well, right? And what we do is basically we believe that in the past, when we need to get financial services, it's a face-to-face interaction, right? You go to the bank or you go to your relationship manager and they talk to you. They understand you, and probably sometimes you get rejected, sometimes you get whatever you need to get, like a loan, for example, or credit card, right? But we believe that actually you don't have to do that. There's a more efficient way of doing that. And that way is, if I can collect sufficient data from you in this digital age, I can actually get a better understanding than a face-to-face interaction. That's what we do. We look at how do we innovative use of data to do that. And to date, I mean, the professor just quoted some numbers, right? We have sourced loans application around 1.5 billion in Hong Kong. China is now only been operated for 6 to 8 months. We have 8 times the number of customers in China than Hong Kong. And to date, we have never met a single one of our customers. But yet, I have suffered only a zero fraud loss. I've never had a fraud loss, even though I've never met a customer. How do you do that? Now, bank meet customers every day, but they have fraud losses. Now, I'm not saying that I never have a fraudulent application. People will test the system. Every day people test the system, but we manage to catch 100% of them. That is the power of technology and data. And people often ask me, Simon, so what are you doing? Are you just like putting application form online? A bank is doing that. I said, no, I'm not doing that. Banks can do that. They do it very well. Are you launching a P2P platform? I said, no, I don't really need to do that as well. There are 1,500 people doing that in China. But this is actually the innovation of WeLab. It is three things, right? How do we approve loans to customers that previously no one can approve? What are we doing right now? Students, people live in rural areas in China. Previously, banks don't have sufficient data access to these customer segment. How do we, with the use of data and technology, provide financial services to them? That's the first innovation. The second thing is, how do I take a split second to process something that previously took days for a bank? In Hong Kong, it takes around an average 5 to 7 days for a bank to process an application. It takes us around 3 seconds. How do we actually shorten it? And the third thing is efficiency. How do you lend money to someone to achieve the aspiration at a fraction of the cost? How do you do it so efficiently that it is the friction to borrow money to do something, to start a business, to, I don't know, go on a holiday with their wife at a fraction of the cost? Once the friction is very high, they will never do it, right? It'll be very, very difficult. So at the core of the company, this is what we look at every day: accessibility, speed, efficiency. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Simon. So I think now we can get to the exciting part of our talk, where we get to put our collective minds together and talk about this new digital wave that's coming through, the new business models and the trends and the disruption. Okay, so I think I want to start out with maybe discussing about how these new technologies that are coming to the fore, things like IoT, things like big data, cloud computing, disintermediation in terms of business models. Everybody has an intuitive sense that these things are important. We live in a knowledge economy. We understand intuitively that these technologies are going to be able to be very empowering. But at the same time, there's also a lot of hype. Right, the use of big data, I think, is still an evolving sort of concept in terms of what we can do with that kind of stuff. So I'd like to start with this discussion on what are the practical uses? What are the what is Airbnb? What is WeLab doing? What is the companies that Dave is dealing with? How are they actually practically employing these technologies? And maybe give us some insight specifically on what we can do with that data and the analytics and how that's going to be empowering for your individual companies. Yeah. Anyone?
Well, I'll start talking about cloud computing. What isn't cloud-based these days? So, I mean, it's just so pervasive that I think it's a done deal. But big data is a lot more interesting in analytics, in that there was this big wave of big data a few years ago, and I think people have been put off by big data because you have all of this sort of telemetry being generated by so many different applications that if you have all that data, what do you do with it? So I think the world has gone from big data to smart data, and your guys' companies are very big on that, and that's a big part of your proprietary value is in how you turn massive data streams into high value stuff.
Definitely, and for Airbnb terms, I think is mainly around like social currency is one of the things that we also go for. Like, to my point when I was talking about, you can know somebody before you actually meet them, and that's some things that Simon talked about. You can know about their credit history before you meet them. For Airbnb specifically, connect all these things to Facebook, to LinkedIn. What does it really mean? At the end of the day, you're collecting these data so that you can actually verify that person is either trustworthy, they will not be a bad actor on your particular platform, and they're able to maintain the community that we want to maintain. And for us, that's the first part of it. And the second part, we run experience around, like, going to your point about specific examples, we want to match, a good host and a good guest as well. So what are the behaviors of the host? Like, what kind of reservations are they accepting? What kind of reservations are the guests sending out? And through all that, running through an algorithm, you can actually, quite well in terms of succession rate to match two people together where they'll end up, living at someone else's home.
Thank you. So I think Dave said a very good point, right? As much as it's about big data, it's about smart data now, right? The first thing we do, right, that we do very well is data triangulation. When you collect multiple points of data, how do you smartly triangulate to validate a piece of data? For example, right, one thing that we use very effectively in both Hong Kong and China is something called knowledge-based authentication. Just to demonstrate the simplest sense, right? If you call let's say your credit card company, one of the ways they validate your data, validate your identity, is by asking you, do you have other bank accounts with them? Okay, that is a very simple form of actually knowledge-based authentication. But for us, what we do is we generate random questions on individuals, and we ask them questions that only they themselves would know. If you look at, let's say, a fraudulent identity, right? Someone who, let's say, steal someone's identity. Chances are they have a very small window to reuse that identity. You may either steal their mailbox or the email box or physical mailbox, right? You have a very small window before that person discover it, change whatever password, will alert the police and everything, right? So how do you use actually the historical data of that individual to validate the current self? So that is one of the things that knowledge-based authentication does. The second thing is more going to big data, for example, right? Building scorecard, which is very big for us, right? To study behavior of individuals. One of the things that I just saw last night from a team is saying that, okay, we're building one of the scorecard in Hong Kong about a probability of individuals going to bankrupt. Right. Obviously, these are customers that you will not be able to lend money to, and it is really, really difficult to predict bankruptcy in the past if you go to a banking infrastructure, right? But one thing that very interestingly we discovered last night, and we're still validating it, people who fill in their address with capital letters actually has a high probability of going bankrupt. And it's not just in Hong Kong; it turned out in UK as well. Now, probably not after I say this in the public, then this rule will no longer be true, like, because all those who are planning to go bankrupt will start to write in small caps. But it's just one of the many insights that we're gaining with the use of data. And there's a lot of other applications as well. We learn a lot from US e-commerce sites on user experience. I would say we're one of the first few that actually borrow a lot of technology from e-commerce in the US on how do we improve customer experience on our website as well.
So one of the really interesting things to come out of this discussion about big data is the trade-off between privacy and convenience. And, a lot of people are creeped out by the amount of data that's sort of passively collected about them. And the data privacy laws vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction so much that, if you're trying to do this stuff internationally, it becomes really, in some cases, an unnavigable web of different privacy laws that you have to comply with. I mean, my wife signed up for Airbnb last night for the first time.
Thank you.
And she said to me, when I talked to her on the phone this morning, she said, "Have you signed up for Airbnb?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "How much information did you give them?" And I said, I answered all the questions. I mean, my life is an open book anyway. So, I gave a warning about this sort of stuff a long time ago, but she was a bit worried about all the information that she was going to give. So at what point do we sort of just give in and say our lives are a public artifact and anyone can learn whatever they want from us and I'm happy about that? Versus, oh no, there are parts of me that need to remain private, and I don't want people to be measuring me on these various things.
I mean, just responding to that. Well, first of all, thank you for signing up. And the second thing is, like, with data, I feel like it's two things. One is access, and the other is just better decisions, right? Access, you're talking about very private spaces like your own home now. So, I think it's kind of a fair trade. If you're staying in someone's home, it's also fair for them to know a little bit about you. So it's certainly having a fine line about understanding each other online. And the second thing is about better decisions. I mean, like, part of the attraction about Airbnb is not just the place itself. You're going to meet someone else that you've never met before in, let's say, Barcelona, all right? And knowing a little bit about the host may be the decision point of why first of all, we don't service the people that potentially go for hotels, for example. We service people who look for alternative experiences, right? So they want to meet somebody online to offline. But by knowing a little bit more, quote unquote, data or personal data about that particular host, be like, oh, I want to stay with this host because he or she likes wine. He or she loves design. They love to talk about architecture. Right, these things are some of the more different frames of travel, not just staying in a place. The travel doesn't stop when you get back to your place that you're sleeping in at night. So, yeah.
But it gets more difficult when they're gay or they have ties to criminal networks, or all these.
Well, we have zero tolerance to criminal networks, first of all. But I agree. But this is also the power of decisions, right? Once you have that data, everybody has the right to make their decision as well. And being a network in 190 countries and 34,000 cities, I think the community also has a way of working itself out on their own.
So I think this actually segues into very nicely into the second talk, which is with regard to regulation and the laws associated with the business models that are disrupting the industry. Of course, on one hand, in order to be a disruptor, you need to be able to be a little bit of the rebel, and that's where the opportunity is in sort of the gray area. On the other hand, you have to actually walk a very, very fine line, and sometimes if you cross over that fine line, it's very problematic. So if you look at, I was just at another forum talking to your counterpart, the Uber head of Asian expansion, and if you look at what's happening in Asia, in areas like Korea, the CEO in Korea for Uber might be indicted by the government, right? So clearly didn't play that game optimally, right? So I'm fascinated by this, because if I were to start, I'm an entrepreneur myself, if I were to start a business and you gave me the Uber model or the Airbnb model, I would immediately just shut it down, because I said, well, the regulations are against it. So clearly the people who are able to look beyond just the regulation and take a chance on this are the ones who are well rewarded. So I'd like to discuss this as sort of how does Airbnb, how does WeLab deal with this sort of regulatory thing?
So it's a great question. First of all, I felt like a lot of it was looking towards me, so I'm going to take this first. So I think I think the right question I want to ask is striking that balance between innovation and regulation. I think that's very important. And one thing that Roger said this morning that really resonated with me, being one of the landing teams in Asia, the founders, when they founded the company, they weren't trying to disrupt the space for the sake of disrupting it, right? They created a place where there's a demand for this particular service. People wanted it. And actually, previous to our existence, there were platforms like Craigslist that people do put up these short-term rental requests, or finding a roommate, or finding a guest. These existed. We just came in as a platform and consolidated it too. So one interesting, as you see now, is the education between the government as well as the company is two ways, right? We go in and have open conversations with government. This is what we do. We want to let you know this is our mission, and we also want to know what your concerns are. So through a two-way conversation of understanding what are their concerns, we can then educate them like, this is what we actually bring, the good things that we bring to your economy. What are the bad things you're trying to avoid? We can come to a middle ground. So with countries like, at the very beginning days, more forward-thinking ones are like Hamburg, Amsterdam. They adjusted their rules and regulations to make it work for us. Later, we had bigger ones like Paris and London on the slides that I showed just now that actually agreed to it. And lastly, in the States, you have San Francisco, who's always been the forward-thinking, very edgy kind of city, San Jose and Portland. And lastly, you take Hong Kong, for example, since we're here, and I want to talk a little bit about it. For the rules and regulations in Hong Kong, it doesn't really accommodate for home sharing. 80% of our hosts on Airbnb are sharing their own space. But most of the rules and regulations here are governing guest houses, hostels, hotels, which are cookie cutter services where you have different rooms centralized in one place. But that's not our business. Our business is to be able to help people share their homes. They actually put up that ordinance for review. And recently we put in submissions and asking the government, say, hey, would you have meetings with us? And we were trying to, just want to educate you about what we're doing. And we say that all we want is to make it clear and simple for people to be able to do home sharing. And hopefully, again, I'll have good news to share, but that's TBD.
I just want to, just a quick follow-up on that, because you have a lot of different jurisdictions and governments with different characteristics and priorities. Are you saying then that you actually tailor your service in response to what they will accept? Or is this more just a lobbying exercise where you try to just make it known that you guys are a positive force?
I think it's more the latter. So it's more of a lobby exercise. We want to bring up the good things, the advantages of having a platform like Airbnb. Take New York, for example. There's a lot of news coming out of there about Airbnb. So we had to come to a middle ground as well because we got subpoena. But when you get subpoena, you have to kind of obey to the subpoena, right? And we were aligned with the government where where they were actually trying to remove bad actors specifically off the platform. And for us as a community and as a C2C platform, having bad actors is not good business for us either. So those are the main places that we want to work with the government on, but also very mindful about the privacy data to what you were talking about just now. So as a company, we 100% respect the privacy of everybody. So we do voice out when we need to, and we do lobby when we need to as well.
How about you, Simon? I think actually in many ways, like Airbnb has actually a simpler problem, because if you look at the regulation for this kind of stuff, it's usually at the municipal level, at the city level. Whereas for fintech and this disruptions that's happening there, that usually happens at a higher level, at the federal level. And I imagine Hong Kong is in particular quite conservative for this kind of stuff. So how do you handle this?
So I guess, very early on, we realized one thing, right? Regulations protects existing interests, right? People that is already in the market. It doesn't people that is coming into the market. So we realized that we cannot hope that one day someone will hand me a platform lending or P2P lending regulation. That would not happen, right? So I think then you go and look at things that is permitted and things that is in gray area, right? I think there are a lot of things that in fintech that is related to regulations that is drafted predate this internet age. A lot of that happens like that, and it everywhere in the world, right? And then so you have a choice as an entrepreneur. You have a choice. Your choice is: how do I operate in this gray area? Do I operate in this gray area? So that comes with so there are two thoughts in this, right? Number one is very much like what Henek was saying, right? We actively promote dialogues with different industry groups, different players in the market to educate them about fintech, the benefits, downside, risk. How do we mitigate the risk about fintech in different business models? That's the first thing. Second thing is because we have the benefit of operating in both Hong Kong and China, we should look at fintech, or what China is calls it 互联网金融, 互联网金融. They have very different view to that, right? So we can actually see how different ways of doing it plays out. And Hong Kong, being not a first mover in this, we can also learn very much from the US, the UK, and stuff like that. So I guess whether a player or an entrepreneur would choose, how they choose to play in that gray area very much depends on a few things, right? Whether they are existing players that is in a similar space. For example, in China, when we moved to China, there are already thousands of platforms doing similar things. So on that certain front, we know that, okay, people are pretty much okay with that. Right? In China, for example, the premier came out to say that they have strong support for internet finance. So we know that, okay, this is something that they will be supporting it. So the dialogues and everything will go smoother. So I guess you just have to operate it very differently in different countries. We use a lot of international experiences and risk mitigation to have discussions with different industry groups to let them know how we see this differently, how we're going to play it in this gray area.
Dave, you have any comments on this?
Well, I think it's just interesting that I think most laws are there to protect consumers.
In theory, yes.
In theory. Yes. And often, those laws actually end up protecting existing commercial interests. And for the most part, I think governments are pretty good in the long term about evolving those laws so that they do protect the people that they're meant to protect, the people from whom those governments get their power. The really interesting cases occur when the powerful incumbent is the government. And then there's very little motivation on the part of the government to actually evolve those laws, and so that's when it becomes a lot harder.
Okay. Great. So this topic for this panel discussion is really about the incoming wave, the next trend in sort of these business models and where the technology is going and the innovation that's occurring. So I'd like to understand from each of you where you think this trend is leading to. So everybody now knows, okay, we have the shared economy, we have disintermediation and all this kind of stuff. That is already accepted, and we already see that affecting the world. So clearly the market leaders use that as a base, but that's not enough. It's not enough to just go and say, okay, we're going to just do the Airbnb model for boats. And there's 100 companies doing that already. Okay, so for the true bleeding edge innovators, okay, what are the nuances? What are the tweaks? What are the new directions that you guys are working on to give you the competitive edge that allow you to, survive for a little bit longer?
Okay, I'll take that one. I think for Airbnb, just being in the sharing economy space alone, it's already a pretty new concept. So for us, at the beginning, we're in the business of homes, where people were opening up their homes and sharing everything. So recently, Brian said something. Our CEO, he said, we're now going to go into the business of trips. Meaning that we're gonna, basically storyboarded out what it looks like for someone to go from point A to point B in their travel journey, and we realized that somebody booking it online and finding where to go is only a couple of frames of that. You're traveling is so much more than that. You got how to make the decision of where to go, how to get there, what to do there. A common term that you hear is like, oh, that's a tourist spot, right? How do you dissolve that term? It shouldn't be the tourist spot anymore. It should be something that you go and experience a place in a local way. So for us, Airbnb perspective, we want to get into more of those frames. We want to help local neighborhoods, help local businesses, be able to have a share in the tourism dollars that we bring in through Airbnb. And secondly, to add some added services. So we do experiments as well in terms of what kind of new services we can provide on top of just accommodation. So going off to what you said as well, there are new, we're as a space, we're not getting disrupted yet in terms of sharing economy, but there are definitely added service to Airbnb. So there are companies, I think one from San Francisco that came out called Pillow, that actually helps Airbnb hosts rent out their place by providing some of the other services that we don't. Like, for example, like cleaning services, laundry services. They will provide that on our behalf to our hosts. So those are some of the directions that we will go. I'm not saying that we're going to start a Pillow of our own, just to clarify that. But for Airbnb, we want to be in the business of trips.
For us, right, looking beyond just fintech, right, just generally speaking, right. So Bill Gates very insightfully once said, banking is necessary, but not banks, right? It is actually very, very true, because there is actually a silent revolution happening right now. And I'll share with you guys what we're seeing today, right? The new generation, young people, like very much all of us in this room probably, by the virtual fact that you guys are here in this forum, right? You're changing your buying behavior. You are willing to pay a premium for companies that do social good. You're willing to pay for transparency and efficiency. You're not as price sensitive as the previous generations. People are willing to do that. And these generation, they no longer believe in the big brands. They no longer believe in companies that shoot a nice TVC about helping kids to improve on their soccer skills or clean up the I don't know, the whales on close to New Zealand or something like that. They no longer believe in this kind of selling. They believe in buying something for social good. They believe in transparency and efficiency. If you look at a few large companies that got funded in a private market recently, right? For example, Oscar, right? The great insurance company in the US, right? What do? They provide very efficient, transparent insurance services. If you look at Slack recently just got funded as well, right? These two are over $1 billion company, right? What do? They increase transparency in the corporate communicating in silos. Right? If you look at Wealthfront, another wealth management company that's doing extremely well in the US, what do? They enable wealth management services that previously only available to private banking, high net worth individuals, to everyone else. So this democratizing, transparency, efficiency is a common recurring theme, and people are willing to pay a premium for that. In WeLab, we continuously invest into technology that improve efficiency of providing financial services and transparency, so that you understand what we understand, and we tell you exactly what and how we're going to do it. If you look at, actually, if you notice a logo at the bottom, what we wrote, right? Democratizing finance. This is what we believe in. So I think that the trend is actually going towards that direction. I think the belief or the trust in the old world is slightly eroding, but people are actually willing to buy things from new companies.
Can I just zoom out a bit from both of those and just talk in general? The world is drowning in stuff. We're drowning in piles of rubbish, of things which were designed to have a very short lifespan, and IT is one of the worst offenders in this area. But it shouldn't really be necessary to own lots of things And the sharing economy is all about taking the scarce resources that we have on our planet and actually raising the utilization of those resources where all of us can use them. So you don't need to own a car anymore. You don't need to own a drill, as Roger pointed out, or any one of a number of different things that you might only use every once in a while. So the sharing economy is an excellent way to actually get a lot more mileage out of the scarce resources that we have on the planet. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so optimistic about the future, is because I believe there's tremendous amount of value to be unlocked in that. The downside, though, the people that are getting disrupted are all the people who have manufacturing jobs, of all the people who are dependent on that manufacturing economy, because as we get more and more sharing, there'll be less and less stuff required. So we need to figure out a way around that.
And I completely agree. It's a shifting from ownership to just access, right? For nowadays you don't really need to own a car anymore unless you have a passion for cars. But then if you want to get around from point A to point B, you can do that with the click of your phone. Secondly, I want to point out that in addition to stuff, a lot of stuff, there's also just sharing skills. And you had a platform where it's like teaching people how to speak English in a New Zealand accent, So that's something that I think is very valuable as well, because it's something that I know that I can teach somebody else, and that's something that I think is very, very impactful to everybody. So the education is more available, or just even sharing of just skills like TaskRabbit, right? You can do something without your own time, and with a little bit of money, you can subsidize for it. So absolutely, I agree.
So I think we have about 10 minutes left for this panel discussion, and I know you guys are just raring to sort of get access to this vanguard of new innovators in this sort of shared economy. So I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. If there's anybody that wants to actually maybe speak specifically in fintech or in the shared economy or in startups or in innovation in general. Is there any questions? Yes, lady in the red. Yes.
Thank you. I run Jobdo, a marketplace for temporary jobs. And one of the biggest challenges we have is on screening and make it scalable. So data is actually really expensive, and credibility takes time to build. So how did WeLab and Airbnb start out in the beginning to screen their candidates and also collect data and therefore use the algorithm?
I can respond to that, and good luck with your startup, by the way. I don't think. Maybe I'll zoom one step back. I may not necessarily think the data is what necessarily that pushed Airbnb over the edge. One of the things that the early advice that we got as a company is from Paul Graham, to our founder, and this advice still lives in our company today. It's better to get 100 people to love you than to have 1,000 people that sort of like you. The reason why I'm bringing this up, I know it's not related to your topic directly, but then once you have these evangelists about your particular platform, they will go out to all their friends, their network, and speak well of you. That reputation is something I don't think data can buy, or data can actually help you make. So for us, we in the early days, that's how we started, to be able to build that reputation as a credible platform. People liked the product, people loved to use it to travel, and realized that, hey, there's this new service called Airbnb that I can actually stay at somebody's house, and is a unique service. And then later came the data. Then we incorporated LinkedIn, Facebook. Now you can even scan your ID in front of the screen and verify that you're a real person from that particular respective country that you're from, and that strengthened the trust down the road. So absolutely, I think building trust is important, but I think taking one step back is also building a credible platform that people will talk about. Yeah.
So for us, right? I mean. I recently learned this from a US-based company, but they do mobile phone-based lending in Africa, in like only 1 or 2 African countries. They do it very well, right? And so this is how they did it. And I'm not suggesting you do the same, but it's quite interesting how they hacked this, right? So initially, they have certain assumptions of who is a good borrower. And based on that, they relax a little bit, and they just randomly lend to 1,000 borrowers. They randomly lent to 1,000 borrowers. 50% of them didn't pay back. It was a very painful few months for them. But with that, they collected so much data. And with that, they actually built the scorecard and continuously improved based on it. So that's one of the ways of doing it. Another way of doing it is once you get
a basic scorecard, a great methodology. You partner with people. You partner with people who have data. You sell them something that they don't have, which is probably your approach to data analytics, and use that data to build something useful for them. Through that, you also learn more and more. And with that, you develop your proprietary technology.
Okay, another question.
Yeah, how do you ensure the debt collection?
So I presume that is a question that is directed at me.
Yeah, it is.
It's okay. So we do it many ways, right? Without going to a full lecture on risk management and credit cycle management, right? I think the first thing is finding the right borrower. Right, finding the right borrower actually reduce the risk and the effort required for collections. There are different business models, different lending models. Some heavily geared towards having a strong collection team. Some don't. For example, it depends on the customer segment that you target. Because our target customers are usually young people from 20 to 35 years old, internet tech savvy. So a lot of the interaction, including collection, is actually done through phone, SMS, messaging, email-based, stuff like that.
Okay, any other questions? We have maybe room for one or two more questions here. In the back, on the left. Oh, okay.
Hi. Okay. Just a quick question for both of you, please. When you were starting your business, what were your first challenges, and how did you get through? Because as a business, as somebody who's starting a new business, you always have fear or not sure whether or not this is going to be succeeding. And what were your first challenges, and how did you get through it?
Okay, so for Airbnb, it was a concept that existed in the States when I joined back in early 2012. So the challenges for us in this side of the region was there's definitely a lot of different things, right? Asia or APAC, when you lump it in one term, seems small, but then when you dive into it, it's actually 20 to 30 different countries, many different cultures, different languages, different products. So for us, we first thing is we had to choose a focus. Where do we focus? Where do we actually have traction first in Asia, and then start in those places? That's the first one. Second is once we understood that traction, we then dove in and understood our customers. So even at the early days when I started, I actually took the time to schedule 100 interviews of guests and 100 interviews of hosts, and I actually went to go and talk to every single one of them. It was exhausting, trust me, but it was a lot of feedback of understanding what do we need to do on this side of the globe in order to make the business succeed. And actually by doing that and understanding that, I think it has helped us. We used a nice term called hypergrowth, but by the usage of the people of our platform now, it really shows by localizing the language, localizing the product, addressing the concerns that they have, the business can work. So in a nutshell, that's what we did.
So for us, it's a lot about people, right? It's getting the biggest challenge is getting your first co-founder, your first employee. And finding a co-founder is extremely important. Sometimes, occasionally, at difficult times at night, you lose faith on your business model. Co-founder helps a lot, right? You try to give each other a pat on the back and say, okay, it'll be fine. Finding employees, extremely important as well. Early adopters, early employees. Knowing exactly what you need. I mean, as a startup, you're always constrained by cash. Finding exactly the right talent that you need initially, and where to find them, and finding a great value culture fit. Very, very important. I mean, we always talk about this story, right? The first tech employee that we have to let them go 2 months later. It was very difficult, very painful for a little startup like us, but we just have to do it. It's because an investor told me once, he said, you don't always find the right piece of the puzzle first time, but you just have to keep trying. But eventually, you know what people fit into your culture, what type of talents you want to attract more. So up until to date, right? Even today, most of my time is spending on people, talent, resolving conflicts in a team and stuff like that. And it is not just an initial challenge that we face; it's a challenge that you will forever face as a startup. It's people.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly add on to that. That's one point I missed, and thank you, Simon, for bringing it up. It's culture. Culture is such a large thing, and when I first got here as a one-man band pretty much in Asia, trying to get people to join Airbnb was super difficult. Imagine explaining Airbnb in English took me 10 minutes, explaining it in Chinese and Mandarin took even longer. And doing all that, we have a very long process of knowing the person. So by the time that the person is hired, I feel like he or she is a friend, someone that I can depend on, and that makes and breaks your team and to keep going.
I just want to add one thing. Excuse me. When you're starting your own business, I think it's really important to lose your fear of failure to the greatest extent that you can. Because you need to remember that you're out there every day pushing your business forward, and there are 1,000 different things when you're starting a business that will kill you, and only fewer ways to succeed. I know in New Zealand we have a big stigma about failure, and people are afraid to fail. I understand in here. In Hong Kong it's very similar. But if you can find a way of losing your fear of failure, that would be really good, because failure is actually an excellent teacher, a much better teacher than success is. And every entrepreneur has to have a few failure experiences before they can progress. So don't be afraid of it.
Okay, so we're pretty much out of time, and I'm giving signals to stop, but I just wanted to end on a positive note. So I just wanted to maybe get each one of these entrepreneurs here to give maybe 20, 30 seconds. You're all entrepreneurs. We're all interested in finding new opportunities. 20, 30 seconds, in your opinion, where the juicy opportunities are in the next few years, in the combination of technology and business model, and in which industries, if you will. Maybe start with you, Dave.
Well, there are just so many that it's really hard to pare it down, and it's really difficult to know what's going to be happening in the next few years. But anywhere that you can disintermediate markets where there's asymmetric information, where some people know things and other people don't, anything you can do to democratize that, everyone will have different examples for that, and those are where the real gains are going to be made. So I suggest you go out and talk to people and find out what their biggest problems are and how you can solve those. And if you want some help with this, I'm running a workshop tomorrow here at Cyberport at 10 a.m. Talking about the lean startup methodology and customer development. So feel free to come along to that.
My one is relatively easier. I'm very passionate about my company, and I'm very passionate about sharing economy. So that's something I think that's going to continue to be a trend. Share everything. Make sure you can access everything. Is going to continue to be a trend in the foreseeable future, and do it in a trustable and safe way. And I feel like this sharing economy is going to happen, whether I like it or not. So that's mine.
For us, fintech, we're very passionate about fintech, as I said at the beginning. There's a lot of opportunity in fintech, especially in Hong Kong, where we're one of the leading global financial center, very deep pool of talents in finance. But a lot of them are still working for large organizations. You guys look like a very smart crowd. Leave your company, go and do a startup, try something new, change the world. And one thing stuck with me, and it's actually one of the driving force for me leaving a large company to join a startup. And I just want to share with all of you today: get as uncomfortable as you're comfortable with. Seriously, get as uncomfortable as you're comfortable with.
Oh, and then some.
And then.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Michael.
Thank you for having us. So I think we're now going to move on to lunch.
Thank you, Michael, Dave, everyone. Thank you. They really do deserve your applause. So one more time, please. And Simon, thank you. Thank you, Henek.